Ainsley Silva, Fircrest Behavioral Health. Thank you, Andres Jimenez, for doing this presentation. This is for all the small business people of the world, people who are looking to retire and to have some peace of mind about their retirement plan, how to make their money work for them so it's not just sitting in the bank doing nothing, because it matters where your money spends the night. Andreas is a member of BNI with me, a great guy. I really like hanging out with him and talking shop. And he's gonna help us out with the future and with the past, with some of the debts that people might have, like student loans, and how to get out from under that. Andreas, take it away.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, Ainsley, for inviting me. I look forward to sharing some knowledge and for you, and hopefully get some good feedback. So again, good afternoon or good evening. It's great to be with you guys today. My name is Andres Jimenez, and I am an Edward Jones financial advisor here in the Salmon Creek area of Vancouver, Washington. I have worked for Edward Jones as a financial advisor for the past going on 3 years now, and I've lived in this community for about 7 years. Now, I became a financial advisor because, quite frankly, I have a passion for investing and helping people meet their financial goals. And one of the ways I do this is by helping local businesses and nonprofit organizations set up things like retirement plans, or set up these seminars to help you navigate through your retirement options. So that way I can provide employees like you with opportunities to do things like saving for retirement, or just giving you a little bit more insight in financial education. Now, retirement is a key financial goal for many people, and it can mean different things for everybody listening today. You know, maybe you want to travel, maybe you want to volunteer, maybe you want to work part-time, or hey, maybe you want to go back to school. I have a few clients that have definitely have done that. Now, whether you decide you know, or whatever it is that you decide, right, you need to be financially prepared. And that's what I'd like to talk about today, right? How you can prepare financially for the retirement you vision or envision. Now, a couple of things that we will discuss today. You know, one, why we need to start saving for retirement. Number two, why you need to start saving now. And number three, how to start saving through things like employer-sponsored plans or other employee plans. I'll also touch on, you know, building for retirement outside of your business plans or your employer-sponsored plans, including things like IRAs and Roth IRAs. I know there's definitely questions about debt management that we can touch on as well. So we can definitely dive into some of those things here shortly. All right, let's go ahead and just get started. I'll throw in some numbers for you. All right, so why save for retirement? Well, unfortunately, you know, many people are facing retirement completely unprepared. So consider the following from the Employee Benefit Institute research. So 33% of workers age 55 or older have less than $25,000 saved for retirement, and 54% have less than $100,000. Now, 67% of workers surveyed said that they expect to work in retirement, but only 27% of retirees report earning income during retirement, meaning that many have had to depend on their savings. Now, many were forced to retire earlier than planned due to health or other reasons. Now, ask yourself, okay, is $25,000 or even $100,000 enough to cover your years in retirement? Probably not. And I'll give you another reason why. We're living longer, guys. Average life expectancy. So consider the average 65-year-old who will spend about 20 years in retirement. That's the average. So about half of the group here listening to this or watching this will spend more than 20 years in retirement. Now, additionally, okay, a 65-year-old couple has a 50% chance that at least one spouse will reach age 90, and then 20% chance that one of those spouses will reach 95. Now, a survey by the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that nearly 40% of retirees said that they expect to outlive their savings. Let's talk about Social Security, right? Reaching retirement is a major goal for most people, and so is having enough income in retirement. Now, while Social Security wasn't meant to be the sole source of income, it definitely serves as a foundation for many people's retirement income plans. Now, on average, right, Social Security is only really supposed to provide about 40% of income in retirement, at least according to the Social Security Administration. Unfortunately, guys, the sad statistic is about 1 in 3 people that are retired right now solely rely on Social Security. Perhaps somebody that you know that is struggling to meet ends meet because of their limited of fixed income. Now, with that being said, it's good to know the amount that you're going to be expected to receive from Social Security. And you can actually look at this data yourself. You can go to the www.ssa.gov. That website will also feature an online benefit estimator. So I definitely encourage you all to go on and check to see what you might be eligible for when it's time for you to retire. Now, let me give you another reason, right, to save for retirement. Inflation, that's a huge topic right now. Now, historically, inflation rate has been about 3% per year. Now, at that rate, the cost of goods and services will double every 25 years. Now, to put the impact of inflation into perspective, okay, consider how prices have risen historically and how they could rise over the next 25-year period. Now, assuming that they grow at the historical rate, which we've kind of seen a little bit of an average, higher than average spike this year. Now, in this chart, consider the impact of inflation between 1982 and 2008, right? At that rate, monthly groceries that cost about $142 back in 1982 are estimated to cost more than $1,900 in 2033. Guys, it's 2021 right now. 2033 is not that far behind. Now, I hope I've given you some insight on why it's important to start saving for retirement. Now, let's look why you need to start saving now. All right. Now, if time works against you with inflation, then you got to make it work for you with compounding. The longer you contribute to retirement, the more time your earnings have the potential to grow and benefit from compounding. Now, this table illustrates the amount you would have to save each month with pre-tax contributions to reach the same investment goal. The earlier you begin to invest, the less you need to save each month. Now, of course, this is just a hypothetical illustration and it doesn't reflect any specific investment, but this does assume a hypothetical 6% rate of return, which is a very, very attainable goal to reach for long-term investors. If you're age 25 and you put in $200 a month into a vehicle that averages about 6% rate of return, at age 65, you can see here on the chart, you should be able to accumulate about $400,000 for retirement. You wait 10 years, you're going to have to double that to get that same amount. And if you wait till you're 55, you're going to have to suck away over $2,400 to get that same $400,000 by 65. Now, again, to work effectively, okay, compounding requires two things: reinvestment of earnings and time. That's why it's so important to start saving as early as possible. So waiting to start funding your retirement plan, it could be costly. Let's talk about the cost of waiting, okay? Let's look at another hypothetical situation. We'll call this guy Michael, okay? Michael is 30 years old. If he contributes $6,000 each year in his employer-sponsored plan, plus an additional $1,000 once he reaches age 50, because you can do that, it's called the catch-up rule, assuming a 7% hypothetical rate of return, which again is a very attainable goal to reach, he will have $986,000 by the time he reaches age 65. Now, if he just waits 3 years, all right, just 3 years to start investing, his account value will drop to $793,000. Guys, that's a difference of more than $193,000. That's almost $200,000 for just waiting those 3 years. Now, if he waits 10 years, okay, his account value is less than half of what it would have been at age 30, right there at around $471,000. Now, have I convinced you that it's important to start to save and it's important to start saving now? Well, now let's start talking about how we can start saving. Now, your employer retirement plan is a great way to begin, or at least continue. Now, I know many folks on this call might not necessarily have a employer retirement plan, but I think this is kind of good information just to let you know what your options might be either down the road, or maybe you've had one in the past. Because on average, you're going to need about 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement. Now, of course, that number can vary depending on what your retirement might look like. But let's talk about 401ks and 403bs and 457s for just a quick second. Now, the maximum amount that you can contribute to those is lesser of $19,500 or 100% of your annual compensation. If you're age 50 or older, you can contribute an additional $6,500. Some employers offer a matching contributions, so that might be eligible to some people out there. But typically, you got to reach a triggering event, such as separating from service, before you can take a withdrawal. If you do take a withdrawal prior to age 59 and a half, just know that you'll be subjected to a 10% early withdrawal penalty unless an exception applies. There have been some exceptions out there, and there are ways sometimes you can reallocate this money to other investments without penalties, whether it's a first-time home or whether it's paying for higher education. These are some benefits in your 401k or some of your other employee retirement plans. Now let's talk about simple IRAs. If you're a contractor, if you're a sole employee, if you're a business owner where you're really the only one, or maybe you have a few numbers of employees, this might make sense for you, right? The maximum contributions to your simple IRA is going to be lesser than $13,500 or 100% of your annual compensation. If you're age 50 or older, you can contribute an additional $3,000. If you're part of a simple IRA, then your employer may also contribute 2% to any eligible employees to match your contributions up to 3%. Now, again, remember, these funds are designed for retirement. If you take a withdrawal prior to age 59 and a half, you will be subjected to that 10% early withdrawal penalties unless exceptions applies. Those exceptions are few in between, but sometimes those exceptions do make sense. I definitely advise to either talk to a retirement specialist, a financial advisor, or a tax attorney about some of these options that you have coming down the road. Speaking about taxes, let's talk about the tax advantages. Now, saving for retirement through an employer-sponsored plan like a 401k or a simple IRA that I just talked about have traditionally been pre-tax. That means that each dollar you contribute reduces your taxable income for that current year. In addition, your contributions and earnings are tax deferred, so you don't pay taxes on them, at least until you withdraw the money. Now, before you go thinking about a contribution as another deduction from your paycheck, let's take a closer look at the impact of pre-tax contributions on your take-home pay, okay? Now, in this illustration, we'll call her Beth, all right? Beth contributes about $100 of her $2,000 biweekly gross pay into a retirement account. Now, because Beth is in the 28% tax bracket, her federal income tax is reduced by $28. So even though she's contributing $100, the difference in her take-home pay is only $72. Now, some of retirement plans, maybe some simples or Roths or 401ks offer a Roth component, right? Those are going to be different tax advantages. In Roth accounts, you pay taxes before you contribute in exchange for tax-free withdrawals in retirement. Now, again, upon reaching triggering events, you can withdraw your contributions tax-free since you've already paid taxes on them. Now, withdrawals of your earnings are tax-free, but you have to hold on to those accounts for at least 5 years, and you have to be, again, 59 and a half years old before taking them out without any sort of penalties before taking out before then. Now, making Roth contributions may make sense if you expect your taxes to go up in the future, or if you already have significant pre-tax savings, or if you don't like the uncertainty of future tax rates, right? One thing we can definitely probably guarantee on always going up is going to be our taxes. So again, talk to a tax attorney if you think this might make more sense to you. If your employer doesn't allow for Roth deferrals, then you may be able to take advantages of Roth IRAs outside of those, which we will talk about in just a moment. All right. So let's talk about choosing your investments. All right. Once you decide how much you're going to contribute and what type of account you're going to contribute to, it's time to make some investment selections. The right investment for you depends on a couple of different factors, right? Such as your risk tolerance, your life stages, and of course, your goals. I get a lot of questions about risk tolerance. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a moment. Now, risk in the investment world is usually associated with volatility, right? You might have heard this terminology in the news or MSNBC or Fox News, right? The stock market never moves in a straight line, right? There are ups and there are downs. In general, the higher the potential return of an investment, the more volatility you must be willing to accept. Now, by finding the right balance between the risk you're willing to accept and the return you anticipate you're receiving, you'll be in a better position to stick with your investment strategy, regardless of what the market is doing. Now, I also mentioned your life stage, right? This is going to depend on where you are, where you are as far as retirement, what your time horizon, when you be using this money. So you need to figure out what that time frame is going to be looking like for you. Now, once you kind of have that figured out, you need to figure out what your portfolio objective is, right? Once you figure out your risk tolerance and your life stage, you now get to check the appropriate boxes to identify your portfolio objective. For example, right? If you're in the early investing years and have relatively high risk tolerance, you probably want investments with more of a growth focused allocation. Now, on the other hand, someone in higher income and savings years with a lower risk tolerance may prefer more of a portfolio balance with a split of growth and income. Now, keep in mind that other factors also influence your portfolio objectives, such as your time horizon or income needs and other things that you might have outside of this, like existing savings, for example. Now, once you know your portfolio objective, you can now start selecting investments that fall into those appropriate categories in the appropriate amounts. So let's compare growth focus versus balance towards income focus, for example, right? As you can see here, a growth focused portfolio, you're going to have more exposure to equities. Your downturn or your down market protection is going to be your income, your bonds, your CDs. Typically, when markets have volatility, fixed incomes tend to counteract that. So it helps to mitigate losses. If you're someone that's going to be more in that balance towards growth and income category and you don't have as much stomach for volatility, then then looking at a balance towards growth and income model where equities is 50, income and cash is 50 is going to give you less ride. It's going to give or less bumps in the ride because you're going to have more exposure to bonds, right? You're going to have more downside protections, but with lower exposure to equities, you're going to have less opportunities for returns. So depending on who you are, depending what your time horizon is, what your risk tolerance is, you're going to want to have the right allocation for you. Now, these suggested percentages ranges can help you make investment elections from those available in your employer-sponsored plan. Your portfolio objective can really change over time. So make sure that you are reviewing these quarterly at a minimum. Now, other options, right? Let's touch briefly on other tax advantage options for building your retirement savings outside of your employer-sponsored plan. Now, one way to save is an additional retirement plan outside of something of your employer-sponsored or something that you're doing on your own, like a simple IRA, right? There are two types of IRAs. There are traditional IRAs and there are Roth IRAs. So I will break those down for you, right? A traditional IRA is very, very similar to the 401k, 403b, 457b, and those simple IRAs that we just talked about just a moment ago. Contributions may be tax deductible depending on your income level. Plus, any earnings growth is tax deferred. So taxes are due upon withdrawals, and withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half may be subjected again to that 10% IRS penalty. There's three people you don't want to mess with, right? The I and the R and the S. You could put your traditional IRA funds in virtually anything, any investment you choose: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs, treasury bills. People are putting cryptocurrency in their IRAs now. You can contribute up to 100% of your earnings income or $6,000 to a traditional IRA each year, whichever's less. Now, those ages 50 and older can contribute an additional $1,000 per year for a total of $7,000 per year. That's that catch-up rule that I was talking about in the other vehicles that you can use as well. Now, Roth IRAs, all right? Roth IRA is a very similar to Roth deferrals in those 401ks and 403bs. Your contributions are after tax, and any earnings growth is tax-free, provided that you've had your account for, again, more than 5 years, and you don't start taking withdrawals until you're age 59 and a half. Now, as in the case with a traditional IRA, you can invest Roth IRA funds in almost any investment you choose, right? Be aware, however, that your eligibility to contribute does depend on your income. The contribution limits for a Roth IRA are the same as those for the traditional IRAs. But again, talk to your CPA, your tax attorney, to really see which is going to be the best route for you to go. Because as I mentioned, there is a income limit for people that are eligible to put into a Roth IRA. Now, employer-sponsored plan options, right? If you have money in an employer-sponsored plan from a last job, let's say you had a job a few years ago before your current job, and maybe they had an old 401k that you left over there. You have options with that old 401k, right? You can either, one, you can leave the money there in the former employer's plan if you want to, or if it's permitted, right? Number two, you can move the money to a new employer's plan, or one that is available if rollovers allow you to. Number three, you can roll that money into an IRA, right? Give you more flexibility and freedom to invest the way you wanted to invest, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of the former employer. Or lastly, you can take the cash out of the account. You are subjected to tax consequences, of course, but let's face it, sometimes we need to allocate our funds, whether it's paying off debt, whether it's helping with a home purchase or a large purchase, whether it's helping to pay for higher education. This is what this money's for. Now, again, seek out advice from a tax professional to make sure you know what the consequences are for that. But this is what this money can be allocated for potentially. Now, after you've carefully reviewed your options, or again, and consulted your tax professional, right, you decide to roll over your employer or retirement plan assets into an IRA. You can still do so without paying any sort of taxes or penalties. It's called a rollover. It doesn't create a taxable event, right? Your money continues to have the opportunity to grow with tax advantages. And then you can make additional contributions if you put into that IRA. The appropriate type of IRA will depend on the type of money you're going to be rolling over. Again, you should consult a financial advisor or a tax professional before making those moves. Now, one important note about rollovers I want to make sure I at least address, at least into a Roth IRA. Although there are income restrictions for contributions to an IRA, there are no income limits for rollovers to a Roth IRA. Now, typically, this is where I would go into instructions on how you would enroll into your employer-sponsored plans, but I know this is a little bit different in this scenario. But, this is, again, where I would typically ask for any questions or, looking for any sort of guidance on anything that we didn't cover today, or maybe questions that we did cover today. So I know, Ainsley, we got you on here if you have any questions, or if you'd like me to touch on anything else that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
You got to put yourself on mute.
Unmute. There we go. I was wondering about your advice with either contracted 1099 people, or like our business model is take as little as possible, so we don't have an employer contribution set up. So what would be a good SEP, IRA, Roth option for a small business like ours?
Perfect. It would really go back to that, probably that. So if you are a contractor, you're your own business, there's going to be two options for you. Actually, three options, right? You can do a 401k, your own 401k. It's called a solo 401k. You can do a simple IRA. You can do a SEP IRA. as a business owner, you have options of your own employer-sponsored plan, even if you're your own employer. Again, it's going to depend on how much you want to contribute, the cost of the plan, so the contribution limits and things like that. But again, I hate to throw it back to your tax advisor, but it really is going to be dependent on each of that person. But for every business owner, you do have options and avenues to go through, whether it's that simple SEP or 401k. Now, again, outside of that, anybody can put into a traditional IRA. So, whether you do it as a business owner or you want to do it outside of it to complement or to add to your long-term savings, those will be your best bet. Either that SEP, simple 401k on your own, or also opening up your own individual IRAs. Not to mention you're non-qualified as well. You can also do a brokerage account. Now you're going to have different tax implications to that, since they're not going to be tax deferred, but that you can put long-term savings to complement the rest of your I guess retirement plan.
And then we're wondering about student loan debt. So we're talking about setting aside money every month for retirement and investments. And how should people manage that with their student loan debts?
All right. So about student loan debts. So potentially this money can be used to reallocate to help pay for student loans debts. Now, as far as maintaining them, right, there is a I've talked about this with Ainsley before. There is a principle or called the hedonic treadmill, right? It's the theory that, that we have this idea where we have a set budget, right? And they have this idea in this head that once we start making more money, or maybe once we paid off an old debt, we can then use that extra money to reallocate to pay off other existing debts. The problem is that people get caught in this treadmill where they see the money and they spend it, right? So it really falls on the responsibility and the discipline of that individual to not get caught in that treadmill, to really be aware of it. If you're aware of it and you're setting goals and you're including this awareness of this budget that you want to keep yourself accountable, share those goals with other people, keep yourself accountable and having them keep you accountable. It's really more of a disciplinary policy or principle than anything. If you have and it also kind of goes to paying yourself first, right? Paying yourself first is something that a good habit that we want to get into, seeing it as a bill. The same way we want to see paying off student debts as a bill, right? If we are an increase in pay, or if we have allocated or we've already paid off an existing bill, let's be really disciplined about using that money. Write it down, whatever it is that you have to be accountable for yourself, but then using those funds to apply straight into those other areas that you want to get paid off as well. So unfortunately, there's no magic wand. There's no magic answer. It's just really being aware that we as humans just have a tendency, if we see it, we spend it. So out of sight, out of mind, right? That's kind of be your best bet.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's the make sure that your student loans, you're taking care of those and paying those and prioritizing them, and then also saving for retirement at the same time.
No, absolutely. You can both can be done. It's just, again, keeping yourself accountable, keeping yourself disciplined, paying yourself first, and making sure you're setting priorities on what you want to pay off. So that way you can then use that money to reallocate to, even more down the road for your retirement or other things that you want to set your goals for. I think that's
it. I think that's all the questions that I had. And if anybody has more questions, feel free to email me or Andres, and we'll get you connected to the right information, and hopefully we'll be able to get you set up for your future and your retirement. And Andres, I thank you for the presentation. I'm sure he'd love to help if anybody has any questions.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Ainsley. There's no cost for a conversation. So, we'll make sure we put my information up there if I can be a resource, help you navigate through some of those questions that you have. Not everybody needs a financial advisor. But I'm here to at least educate the community, depending on how much handholding you need or what your finances look like. I'm always down to have a conversation to help guide people to the right way. So thank you very much for having me. And I look forward to maybe helping any of these viewers here down the road.